Chapter 20. Alex and Frank decided to take Frank's car back to Salinas. The plan was for them to do a thorough search of Erin's house and see if they found anything useful. It's going to be really embarrassing for everyone if it turns out she was taking a long weekend at a spa and just forgot to tell you, I said. I knew that wasn't super likely, since it seemed like no one at work had known about it, but maybe she had told the necessary admin people and just forgotten to tell Alex, or, more likely, deliberately avoided telling him. Maybe she was feeling completely overwhelmed by everything and had decided to spend 3 days on her own, getting massages and mud treatments and thinking about what to do about her current boyfriend, who'd shot her, in the breast, her ex-boyfriend she couldn't seem to let go of, and the ugly mess that was threatening to come pouring down on her head. The fact that she'd packed seemed like a very good sign to me. Nah, said Frank. She's fucked up so many times, she's got to know this is what you get. Oh, I said. Okay. Well, good luck. And I headed back to the apartment. I really did need to do laundry, so the first thing I did was take a load into the rather grim little laundry room off to the side of the apartment building. It had a small crack at the top of the wall that I hadn't noticed there before, presumably from yesterday's earthquake. But the rust-spotted washer still worked as well as it ever had. I left my clothes chugging away and went back up to the apartment. After a moment of trying to convince myself that I should really do some cleaning, I pulled out my laptop instead and started searching. The first thing I looked up was Heather Ramirez's articles for the past couple of years. She had been published an average of once a month in that time, in a lot of the major publications you'd expect to feature a serious investigative reporter. I skimmed through the articles. A lot of stuff about Syria, the Oil for Food program, the Gaza Strip, the Oil for Food program, the Donbass, the Oil for Food program. That was weird. The Oil for Food program, in which Iraq had been allowed to sell oil in exchange for food and medicine, had been phased out years ago. Why was Heather writing about it now? I read the articles through carefully. I had only the vaguest memories of the Oil for Food program from when it was actually running, so most of this was news to me. It had, I learned, been started in 1995 as a way to try to corral the Saddam Hussein regime while also providing the Iraqi people with desperately needed humanitarian supplies. And, of course, let the rich countries get their hands on that sweet, sweet Iraqi oil. That part was not in the official program description, but Heather and I both thought it was a major factor. It had been de facto ended in 2003 with the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Subsequent investigations had discovered widespread corruption, with foreign contractors providing kickbacks to highly placed officials in the Iraqi government, and ordinary Iraqi citizens receiving expired or spoiled food and medication. There was nothing surprising about that, although the $10 billion in illegal money that had been pocketed was pretty impressive. But bribes and kickbacks were how a lot of regimes worked. Without them, the gears of government would grind to a halt, and nothing would get done at all. There was also nothing surprising in Russia being the #1 foreign beneficiary. The USSR, and then Russia, had maintained close ties with various Middle Eastern regimes for decades, and corruption was the default method of doing business. And, as Heather pointed out, the program had in fact achieved its main aim, preventing the Saddam Hussein regime from creating weapons of mass destruction. $10 billion in kickbacks might be an acceptable price for that. Too bad about the lengthy and destructive war we'd engaged in to find that out. More surprising were the allegations that Kofi Annan, then Secretary General of the UN, had been involved. Subsequent investigation had cleared him of any wrongdoing, but many other high-ups in both the Iraqi and foreign governments were definitely involved, including, Heather alleged in her articles, members of the U.S. military. I checked the time. I'd been reading for the better part of 2 hours. I hustled over to the laundry room and put my wet clothes in the dryer. Then I hustled back to the apartment and called Heather. Chapter 21. You're persistent, aren't you? I guess so, I said. She laughed. I like it. Any word from Erin yet? None on my end. What about yours? Not a damn thing. So what's up? I've been reading your articles, I said. She laughed again. I'm flattered. And I was wondering, I said. Wondering what? Was Erin involved in the oil for food, or whatever it became once the U.S. invaded, boondoggle? Is that why you're so hot to talk to her, and she's so scared to talk to you? There was a long pause at the other end of the connection. Damn, you're smart, Heather finally said. It took me months to get there. I had the benefit of reading your articles. I was just following in your footsteps. And those footsteps seemed to be leading to the U.S. military. Which got me to thinking, what if the real scandal wasn't torture? What if it was corruption? Oh, there was plenty of torture, too, said Heather. I'm sure, but we've already had the exposés of what went down at Abu Ghraib and Gitmo. I can't believe what she was involved in was so much worse. I'm sure it would be ugly for her if it came out, but she was just following orders, right? And we got it out of our system already. We had a big witch hunt after the low-ranking woman who became the public face of a widely implemented policy, sent her and a handful of other low-ranking people to prison, and promoted everyone else. Right, said Heather, and the American public mostly didn't give a good goddamn. Most people are pretty cool with torture as long as it's not being done to them, I said. Too fucking true. You sound like you know what you're talking about. Were you with Erin? Her voice sharpened with excitement. Do you know something about it? No, I said. I saw things from the other side. And mainly in Russia. I worked for a human rights NGO there, gathering evidence of torture and other abuses. So I've never tortured anyone, but I've spoken with a lot of torture victims. Fuck, said Heather. So you know what it's like. Uh-huh, I guess. Yeah, well, you're right. The site where Erin was working, that was mainly just minor league stuff. None of the really freaky, sick, sexual shit you hear about. At least not that I've been able to find out so far. Not even a lot of waterboarding. Just your garden variety sleep deprivation and stress positions. It sounds pretty benign when you say it, doesn't it? Yeah, I said. Not so benign when you actually live through it. Hell no. Sleep deprivation is appalling. But the point is, no one's going to care about that. If anything, it'll probably raise Erin's profile where it matters most to her. Uh-huh, I said. But corruption now. We're okay with our brave service members torturing civilians and killing kids, but not lining their pockets while they're at it. That's un-American. Was that what Erin was doing? I was having a hard time imagining Erin being involved in a simple bribery and kickback scheme. She was fucked up, but she was, as far as I could tell, fundamentally honest. She might hurt other people if she thought they were the enemy, and hurt herself and the people she cared about because she didn't have any better way of dulling the pain she was drowning in. But I had a hard time imagining her stealing. Tell you what, said Heather, why don't you and I get together? I'm not doing anything better today, and it sounds like maybe if we put our heads together, we can figure out some stuff. And maybe help Erin, too. You might not believe me, but I don't want to hurt her. I think she's been hurt enough. She's just a stepping stone to bigger and better targets. And I meant it when I told her I wanted to give her a chance to tell her side of the story. I don't know that it'll help her, but it'll give her a chance to get it off her chest and let the world know what it was like. Because what happened to the prisoners was awful, but what happened to people like Erin was pretty awful, too. Yeah, I said. Sounds good. When and where do you want to meet? This is pretty sensitive stuff. I take it you're not alone. Actually, right now I am. I'm at my boyfriend's apartment, but he's out at the moment. I doubt he'll be back anytime soon. But it's not that nice a place. Oh, whatever. You should see the dump I live in. What if I come by around noon and bring sandwiches? Put in the order at your favorite place and I'll pick it up. Veggie and cheese for me with a Diet Coke. Sounds great, I said. Chapter 22. I had enough time before Heather arrived to order lunch, veggie and cheese for both of us, finish my laundry, and fret about whether I was making a terrible mistake. That possibility hadn't occurred to me at all when I'd agreed to her suggestion. But then I'd started to wonder just how safe this was. What did I know about her, really? How sure was I that the woman I was talking to was even Heather Ramirez? Don't be ridiculous, I told myself. It has to be her. It was the number Dima gave you, wasn't it? And she obviously knew what you were talking about when you referenced her articles. And how dangerous could she be, anyway? A quick mental survey of the possibilities led me to consider and reject the idea of her being a serial killer who was targeting me for nefarious reasons of her own. That was too far-fetched to even be worth considering. A more realistic concern was that she might somehow get me to reveal something and then use it against me, or publish it when I didn't want her to. I debated calling Alex and letting him know what was going on. He'd probably want me to if he knew. But I was afraid that if I did, he and Frank would come hot-footing it down from Salinas and barge in on me and Heather and ruin everything. Either they'd scare her off, or they'd blab a bunch of stuff to her that would be better remaining secret. I didn't know how much she knew about them and their involvement with Erin's problems. The fact that she hadn't gone after them yet made me think she didn't know much. From what I could gather, Frank had been high enough ranking to hold real power, and had been somehow instrumental in getting Erin and Alex involved. Alex had, he said, just done the paperwork, but a person who did the paperwork was a person with lots of knowledge. If I were Heather, I'd be after him morning, noon, and night, trying to find out what he'd seen on those boring government forms he'd been typing up in triplicate, or whatever the modern equivalent was. So, what with one thing and another, I decided not to tell Alex and Frank. It would be a fun surprise for them if I found out something really worthwhile. And I'd just have to take my chances that Heather wasn't a serial killer. When she showed up at my door at 12:03, holding a bag of takeout subs, she didn't look much like a serial killer. She looked like a 50-ish woman who'd seen a lot and done a lot and couldn't be surprised by much anymore, but still believed in the possibility of human goodness even so. She had a body that wasn't exactly fat, but certainly wasn't thin and well-kept either. Weathered skin with just enough brown to it to hint at her Hispanic heritage. Poofy 80s-style hair streaked with gray, just like Tori had said. And cheap sunglasses that revealed big brown eyes full of intelligence when she took them off. "Well," she said when she stepped inside, "I can see why Kuznetsov went for you. I always heard he couldn't be bothered with women, but I can see why he made an exception for you." I said. "Thanks, I guess." She smiled wryly. "Let me guess, your looks are a burden and you just want to be respected for your brain." I said, "I don't think that's really the case either. I'm just kind of me." She smiled some more. "Fair enough. Shall we eat? I'm starving." "Sure," I said. "Me too." I got out Alex's 2 plates and put them on the table. Heather got out the subs, the paper napkins, and the 2 bags of chips and 2 sodas she'd gotten to go along with our modest meal. We arranged ourselves around the table with only moderate awkwardness. Heather, I could already tell, was a straight-talking tough cookie, but she also had that all-important but indefinable quality of realness that made it possible to be comfortable around her. "What happened there?" she asked once she was sitting. I followed her pointing finger to the crack in the ceiling. "Earthquake," I said. "You felt it too. I wasn't sure at first. Thought maybe I dozed off and was having a hot dream or something. But then I checked the news and, yep, earthquake." "Yeah," I said. "They're still a little scary for me." "You're not originally from California, then?" She followed up her question with a big bite of her sub, but her shrewd eyes were fixed firmly on me as she ate. "Nope, Georgia. I'm just here for the summer, teaching at the Summer Language Institute. Got it. That how you know Erin? I said, sort of, yeah. She made as if to take another big bite, then stopped herself, curiosity winning out over hunger. Sounds to me like there's a story there. Our relationship is complicated, I said. She cocked an eyebrow. Complicated, like former lovers complicated. Oh no, nothing like that. She waited in silence. I waited in silence too. I was good at keeping quiet. I was also worrying again about where I was on the Kinsey scale, now that I just had 2 comments implying same-sex attractiveness, and that was taking up a lot of my mental energy. Oh, come on, spit it out, Heather said eventually. She grinned. I'm going to find out anyway. You might as well tell me, spare us both the trouble of me digging through it. And this way you can control the messaging. We don't actually know each other that well, I said. We met through a mutual friend. Uh-huh. Heather looked around the apartment expressively. The mutual male friend you're sharing this apartment with. For a moment, I was tempted to demand how she knew. Then I remembered telling her that I was staying at my boyfriend's apartment, and I noticed what was obviously a man's jacket and man's shoes by the door, a man's sweater thrown over the back of my chair, and a piece of scrap paper on the table with a shopping list in Alex's square, masculine handwriting that included items like yogurt for Rowena and cream for Rowena. Yes, I said. As you can see, I'm living with a man who drinks his coffee black and considers yogurt to be a disgusting abomination. Heather smiled at that. So, who is this mystery man? She asked. I shrugged. A colleague of Erin's. Her smile deepened. And just how collegial is their relationship? I shrugged again. I tried to make the gesture cool and insouciant. It came out more stiff and defensive. I see, said Heather. Her eyes were sharpening. This colleague wouldn't happen to have been involved in the same stuff as Erin, now would he? You'll have to ask her, I said. None of this is my story to tell. She nodded briskly. Fair enough, for now. I can find out who lives here easily enough, anyway. She cocked an eyebrow at me again. Or is there some reason I really shouldn't do that? I shook my head. Not really. I don't have a lot of secrets. But I'm also not going to waste both my time and yours by gossiping and telling tales that aren't mine to tell. I really am worried about Erin, and the sooner we find her, the better for all our sakes. Do you think she might pose a danger? Heather asked. To herself or me? I don't know. I guess I haven't completely ruled out the possibility. Okay, then I'll tell you what I know, or as much as I consider relevant, and you can tell me what you know, as much as you consider relevant, of course. Of course, I said. Maybe you should go first. Chapter 23. You read my articles about oil for food, Heather said between bites of her sub. You already know a lot of the broad outlines. The program was rotten with corruption from the beginning. But what else do you expect? That's how stuff gets done in most of the world. The only thing unusual about this case was the scale of it. I nodded. $10 billion. You got that right. 10 billion hard ones. The ordinary Iraqi people got inedible food and expired medicine, and a few rich people in Baghdad got palaces lined with gold. Uh-huh, I said. And then the U.S. military rolled into town. She paused to take another bite of her sub and wash it down with her Diet Coke. The program went through some major shakeups at that point, she said, once she'd swallowed. A lot of the American military and government personnel who took it over were honest and above board. A few of them weren't. Uh-huh, I said. I'm sure you've heard the rumors, she said. People making off with gold toilets and sending the money home to Kansas or wherever. I decided to vary things up a little. Yeah, I said. I've heard rumors. And there was some of that, for sure, but that's not where the real money was. The real money was in oil, just like it always was. Of course. Russian and French petroleum concerns had been getting plenty of tasty Iraqi oil for the past decade, and they didn't want to stop. So certain sensitively placed people managed to do deals with other certain sensitively placed people. The oil continued to flow, and the rest of us continued to gas up our cars with no major pain at the pump. I went back to my faithful conversational standby. Uh-huh, I said. This is the part where it gets really interesting, Heather said. She put down the last quarter of her sub and leaned forward, her eyes intent on me. You know, of course, that we had a lot of private contractors over there along with military and government personnel. Mercenaries, in other words. Oh, yes, I said. I know. Blackwater got the biggest press, but they weren't the only ones. And a lot of these private contractors, whether they were providing soldiers, interrogators, or dishwashing and laundry services, were raking in the money hand over fist. Yeah, I said. So I've heard. Most of them were making their money semi-legitimately, straight from Uncle Sam. But for some of them, U.S. government contracts weren't enough. They wanted to get into the oil business directly. Or they wanted to cut out the tedious step of procuring and selling the oil and just take the ill-gotten gains of others. Of course, I said. Which is where Erin comes in, said Heather. You think Erin was involved in this? Like, directly, taking bribes and kickbacks or stealing already stolen money? Heather grinned at the surprise in my voice. What, you don't think she's capable of it? Frankly, I said, no. She nodded in agreement. Frankly, neither do I, she said. But I tracked down a few of the people she interrogated and interviewed them. And one of them told me the basic outlines of what I've just told you. He'd been involved with both the old and new version of oil for food at a low level. He got hauled in for a few routine questions, he says, and the next thing he knew, he was being kept awake by 24/7 pop music and forced to crouch with his hands over his head until he cried. Heather shrugged. Like I said, it doesn't sound so bad when we're sitting here in sunny California, eating takeout subs and sipping Coke. But it's torture, no question, if it's happening to you. When I talked to him, more than 10 years had passed, and he was still a broken man. I know, I said. Yeah, you do, don't you? So he spilled out everything he had to spill. Actually, he spilled it all out during the initial non-torture-based interrogation. He figured it would buy him some goodwill and get him out of there faster. But instead it bought him his own personal hell, not to mention a deep and abiding hatred of Americans. I think his son was at a jihadist training camp in Pakistan when I talked to him, all because he was so angry about what had been done to his father. Not surprising, I said. Yeah, one of the many little ways we fucked up big time over there. Uh-huh, I said. Yeah, so anyway, he spilled out everything he knew to Erin on the first torture-free interrogation. And he said she got really excited and went to get someone else to hear what he had to say. A man, he said, although he never saw his face, just heard him speaking English. It was the man who ordered the graduation from questioning to torture, he claims, and the man who kept pressing for him to tell them more. And he would have, he said, but he didn't have any more to tell. He told them everything he could about the oil for food dealings, and then he started making stuff up, hoping to get out of there. It took him weeks, he said, and he was never able to convince them that he didn't know more. But eventually someone else, some other man, got him released. He said he thought Erin and the other man weren't happy about it, even though they'd already pretty much come to the conclusion they'd squeezed him dry. He says he saw them arguing about it as he was being escorted out, shouting at each other, he said, almost screaming. Did he say who the other two men were? I asked. Heather shook her head. Like I said, The man who gave the orders never showed his face or gave his name. When he was being led away, after he'd been released, he had his back to him. But he remembers the name of the man who got him out. Actually, he's next on my list of people to talk to, especially if Erin falls through. I think he's around here, too. She gave me a bright look. Maybe you know him, since you run in these circles. He's... She pulled out a notepad and flicked through it. Oh yeah, here it is. Alexander. Alexander James Miller. Chapter 24. I twitched before I could stop myself. You do know him, Heather exclaimed triumphantly. Maybe, I said, but... But what? Her gaze sharpened even further. What else do you know? You're sure you don't know anything about that other man, I asked. Nothing at all. You think you know who he is, she stated. No, I said, too quickly. You at least have an educated guess, then. I started to say something. Then I stopped. Come on, she coaxed. Spit it out. You'll feel better, you really will. It can be off the record. He'll never know you told me. Her face went serious. I take those kinds of promises seriously, you know. I'm sure you do, I said, but I think he might guess anyway. And I'm just debating... Debating what? I think, I said, choosing my words slowly and deliberately, you should maybe give that FBI agent you've been avoiding a call back. Unless you called him back this morning. Heather laughed. No, he sounded like a pain in the ass. I was going to wait until I'd exhausted all other avenues. But you're saying... Her gaze was sharp once again. You're saying he might have something to do with it, that he might be the other man. I have no idea, I said, but he knew Erin back then. And they're close now, very close. I see. Heather gave a sharp, decisive nod. You're right, I should give him a call. She pulled out her phone, then paused. While you're at it, she said, why don't you let me in on what you know about this Alexander James Miller? I think you should call Frank, I said. I think that will answer a lot of your questions. Okay. She gave another short, decisive nod. She tapped on her phone, bringing up her call app. Then she paused, gave me a speculative look, brought up another app, and started typing. After a moment, she found whatever it was she'd been looking for and started reading. It must have been short, because a few seconds later she gave me a surprised look. Then she burst out laughing. You, she said, pointing at me. You. She picked up the grocery list from the table. I take it this is Alexander's handwriting? Alex's, I said. Yes. And I'll bet that's his sweater, she said, pointing at the sweater draped on the back of my chair. And that's his jacket hanging by the front door, because this is his apartment, isn't it? I searched for him in the white pages, and it led me straight back to here. She laughed again. Uh-huh, I said. You weren't kidding when you said your relationship with Erin was complicated, she said. Now I'm sorry I never asked Erin about him, but I didn't want to tip either of them off about what I was up to. Understandable, I said. And yes, it's complicated. And I really do think you should give Frank a call. Last I heard, he and Alex were off in Salinas, looking for Erin together. Yeah. She tapped on her phone again and called. After a moment, Frank's voice came over the speaker. McAvoy, what do you want? Hi, it's Heather Ramirez. I believe you gave me a call last night, asking to speak with me. Well, I'm free this afternoon if you're available. Frank's voice lost its former irritation, filling with that warmth and charm that almost sounded sincere, especially over the phone. This afternoon would be great. Where are you? I'll be in Salinas soon. Can we meet there? Sure, no problem. When and where? How about the Cherry Bean Coffee House, in Old Town, 2 p.m.? We'll be there. said Frank. Heather ended the call and smiled at me brightly. Well, she said, I have to say, this was way more productive than I was expecting it to be. I have to thank you, Rowena. Great, I said, I think. Her face went serious again. I really won't go blabbing about what we talked about, she said. It was all deep background, and I'll never mention your name. And I'll leave it up to you to tell your boyfriend about our little luncheon, or not, as you choose. It's not my business. But I really do have to thank you. The world will be a better place if we can find out what was going on with the oil for food business on Erin's base. Yeah, I said, I know. I'm just worried that people are going to get hurt, even worse than they've already been hurt. But I do think someone needs to look into it. And thanks for coming and talking to me and sharing what you know. Anytime. She reached into her purse, fished out a card, and handed it to me. Call me if you think of anything else. Or, hell, you're bored and you just want to hang out. I like you. You've got depth. Thanks, I said. I'd enjoy that. But I'm leaving for Georgia tomorrow. She nodded. Got it. Still, let me know if you think of anything. And look me up whenever you're back in the area. And I know this is probably a sore subject, but I'll touch on it anyway. Say hi to Kuznetsov for me. Like I said, major respect. Sure, I said. Absolutely. She started to gather up the remnants of our lunch. Don't worry about it, I told her. I can take care of it. You probably need to get going. Thanks. We'll be in touch, okay? She gave me another brisk, decisive nod and left. Chapter 25. I always found that music helped me think, so I put some on while I cleaned up our lunch things. It was the same Florence and the Machine mix I'd had on the other day. Breaking Down promptly came on. Hopefully it wasn't a prediction of the future. Music functioned for me sort of the way tarot or bibliomancy seemed to function for a lot of people. It brought the subconscious currents in my mind to the surface, allowing me to pick up on patterns I hadn't noticed before. I worked with my hands on autopilot while my brain whirled. I hoped I hadn't done a bad thing by encouraging Heather to call Frank. I hoped I hadn't dropped Alex in a big mess or put Heather in danger. The chance of Heather being in danger seemed less likely. I couldn't help but think that Frank could be the other man in the group her source had described. But surely he wouldn't murder a journalist in cold blood just because she was digging around. He had to know better than most how hard that would be to get away with. And I even suspected that on some level he had some morals. They weren't the same as my morals, but they were still there, even if buried deeply. Also, the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like maybe he wasn't the other man. Alex had told me Frank had been a hotshot special forces type of guy. Alex, on the other hand, had been essentially a petty bureaucrat beneath the notice of someone like Frank. Frank hadn't initially remembered him when they'd met again years later here in California. Surely if they'd had a screaming argument in public, though, that would have stuck in Frank's memory. That suggested, if everything I'd been told was the truth, that the other man was someone else. So who? And did it even matter? The much more pressing question, from my point of view, was how this was going to affect Alex. Yes, he'd been involved in something pretty bad, but he hadn't had much of a choice, had he? I was aware this was the case for most people who did bad things. It probably didn't matter much to all the people who'd been interrogated at that base that the people there had just been following orders. They'd still been tortured. Maybe some of the torturers had been taking sadistic pleasure out of their actions, which probably did make it even worse for their victims. I knew all too well how repulsive it was to be on the receiving end of someone else's sadistic pleasure, even over very minor things. And some of them had just been going through the motions, but either way, their victims had suffered a lot. I was pretty sure Vasily Grossman had some rather harsh truths about camp functionaries and life and fate, and they were just as true when applied to American black sites as Nazi death camps. But it sounded like Alex really had tried to do what he could to make things better. And I loved him. Despite the current rocky state of our relationship, I was sure I loved him. Some part of me always would. I didn't want him to be hurt, and I especially didn't want him to be hurt because of me. Think, I told myself as I cleared the table and washed and dried the plates and silverware to the sounds of 7 devils. What do you know? How can you make this better? Okay, I knew that Alex was fundamentally competent, intelligent, honest, and honorable. I simply could not picture him getting involved in some kind of under-the-table corruption scheme. I also couldn't picture him not noticing if something like that were happening around him, or not doing something about it once it came to his attention. Granted, he'd been just out of college back then, still practically a kid, with a lot less life experience and probably less strength of character, but still, he wouldn't have done something like that. I was as sure of that as I was of anything about him. And Heather's story seemed to bear that out. It sounded like he'd gone behind the backs of the people he was working with in order to free someone he decided was innocent. He'd even gone against Erin, despite being head over heels in love with her. Also, I guessed, slightly lower ranked. But he'd gone against her even so, and it sounded like she'd been furious. Erin was more difficult. I knew her a lot less well than I knew Alex, and if I searched my heart and told myself the truth, the main thing I felt towards her was active dislike, served with a side of pity. That was not a good basis for a useful analysis of her character and actions. But I could still try. I knew she'd grown up in wealth and luxury, at least compared to me. Alex had called her a poor little rich girl, with a politically ambitious uncle and parents with more money and power than someone like me could even imagine. Well, I could imagine it. I just couldn't imagine having it. She'd been the black sheep of the family, rebelled, run off and joined up, and gotten into even bigger trouble. She was smart and committed to her job, but also seriously fucked up, with relationship and substance abuse problems. And she tortured people. I tried to imagine Erin taking bribes and kickbacks and funneling illicit Iraqi oil to, say, a private Russian oil company with barely concealed ties to the Kremlin. I had a hard time with it. She was a screw-up, sure, but she was a smart screw-up. She'd have to know how bad the consequences would be if something like that got out. Like Heather had said, Americans can forgive torture. Corruption and bad business dealings, not so much. A pretty female Navy officer with a history of drinking and sleeping around who got exposed for dirty deals with Russia and France would be crucified in the court of public opinion. Her life would basically be over. And as much as I didn't like her, I thought that Erin, too, had morals in her own way, as well as smarts. She wouldn't dishonor her uniform, betray her country, and potentially ruin her future for money. Certainly not for an amount of money that would still require her to work for a living while staying in the lower middle-class house she'd inherited from her aunt. Okay, I said to myself, so what would make her do it? I wiped down the table. More grit and dust had come down onto it from the crack in the ceiling. Hopefully the building manager could get that taped up or something. I looked up. The crack seemed wider than it had the night before. Probably aftershocks, I thought. The house has been creaking and making noise ever since the earthquake. It's probably still moving around and settling. And maybe we're going to have more quakes soon. I started to worry that the building was about to come down around my ears. Then I told myself that kind of fretting normally just hurt me without doing anything positive for anyone, and that I should stop it. I should pack or something. Since I was driving, I didn't have to leave early tomorrow morning, but it made sense to do so if I could. I'd start getting my stuff together. I pulled out my soft-sided suitcase and started packing my freshly washed and folded clothes into it, accompanied by Rabbit Heart. Fevronia came slinking out from under the bed, gave the suitcase some of the evilest side-eye I'd ever seen, and disappeared into the bathroom. Fevronia did not care for car journeys at all, and she seemed to have figured out that there was a connection between them and suitcases. Why did Erin pack up her favorite outfits? Why did she bring her makeup and hair things? That was assuming Frank was telling the truth, but I thought he was. Who would she be going to see if she'd packed that kind of stuff? I stuffed a couple of pairs of socks into the suitcase. Then I pulled them out again, gave the holes in the heels a critical eye, and tossed them in the trash. My wardrobe was not in great shape. Someone she wanted to impress, I told myself. That's who. Okay, who would she want to impress? I considered the possibility of a secret lover. Her behavior did seem to support that. But she was officially with Frank, and she couldn't seem to let go of Alex either. Where would she have gotten the time and energy for a third man? Maybe it was a skanky one-night stand. But why had she planned it and packed for it then? Maybe it was a secret lover. She hadn't been planning to meet Heather. No one from work that we know of. But what if... I examined my underwear. Most of it should probably be tossed too. But then I'd have to go underwear shopping as soon as I got back to Georgia. I stuffed the tatty panties into the suitcase. Swimming came on. What if she was meeting with whomever it was she was dealing with back in Iraq? What if he was her secret lover? It was a leap, but it still seemed possible. She'd met with Heather on Wednesday and sent her away. On Thursday evening, she'd been seen drinking alone, looking very unhappy and texting frantically. And on Friday morning, she'd packed up her favorite things and disappeared. That spoke of both desperation and some amount of planning, and not caring about her job or her relationship. Like, maybe she was incredibly, incredibly desperate. Or she was expecting to come into some money, and maybe something in the relationship sphere as well. Think. Who could it be? The obvious answer was someone she'd served with. The obvious person who would know who that might be was Alex. Not only had he been with her, but he'd been the paperwork guy. He'd have all kinds of knowledge about the personnel there. I reached for my phone, ready to text him. Then I stopped. I didn't want to bother Alex, and I didn't want to bring him my speculations until I had something resembling solid proof. But if the wild idea that had just floated through my head was right, I might be able to find out what I needed to know on my own, anyway. Chapter 26. Alex had said that Erin's uncle was a state senator with ambitions for Congress, and it was an election year. A particularly nasty election year. Maybe he was running in a particularly nasty election. I opened up my laptop and started searching. It took long enough for most of my Florence and the Machine mix to play through again. California only had 2 senators, neither of whom looked to have any connection to Erin, but it had 53 congressional districts. Searching through all that was a slow process. But it paid off. The Republican candidate for one of the 2 districts in San Diego County was a certain Malcolm Carver. Carver was a common enough last name. He didn't have to be Erin's uncle. He had distinguished silver hair cut short and patrician features that, if I squinted, might resemble Erin's. But that didn't necessarily mean much. I resembled Erin, and I was pretty sure there was no common blood between us, other than that of the very general Scotch-Irish variety. I started digging around in his backstory. A successful law practice and political career, community service, happily married to his wife of 37 years, 2 biological daughters and a son by adoption. Son was an Army veteran with a distinguished service record, including time in Afghanistan and 2 tours of Iraq. Aha, I thought, and started digging further. Noel Carver, Malcolm Carver's adopted son, had several news pieces dedicated to him in his own right. He'd been adopted by a prominent San Diego County family as an orphaned 13-year-old. After an initially rocky start, he'd turned his life around and had been a star on both the football and soccer teams in high school. University talent scouts had come sniffing around him, but to everyone's surprise, he'd deferred college in order to enlist in the Army. He'd served 2 years, including a brief tour of Afghanistan right at the beginning of the U.S. invasion there. Then he'd enrolled at UC San Diego. Instead of getting a sports scholarship as everyone had expected, He'd re-enlisted and put himself through college with the ROTC. He'd double majored in Arabic and computer science and ended up in intelligence after graduating and commissioning. He'd done 2 tours of Iraq, including working with locals, gathering intelligence, and questioning insurgents, as the article euphemistically put it. There was a picture of him in uniform, looking appropriately square-jawed and resolute. Like Erin and his adoptive father Malcolm, and me, he had that black Irish look, with almost black hair and blue eyes. Icy blue eyes, I thought. I hoped mine weren't so cold and chilly. Or maybe I was just imagining things because I wanted to dislike him. I also hoped my own widow's peak didn't look nearly so sinister. I dragged myself back to reading the actual article. After getting out of the army, he'd returned to the Middle East as part of a major private security company. Or, in other words, as a mercenary. After a couple of years of that, he'd started his own firm that specialized in brokering deals in the petroleum industry. He was now rumored to be one of the wealthiest people in San Diego County. Aha, I thought again. I reached for my phone. Then I stopped, my fingers hovering just above it. Did I really want to do this? Maybe I should call Alex and ask him what he thought. My fingers descended the last half-inch, picked up the phone, and dialed Alex. The call went to voicemail. I tried Frank. Also voicemail. They were probably deep in conversation with Heather and had put their phones on silent. Just make the call, I told myself. What can it hurt? Just make the call and ask about Erin. I dialed the number I'd found for Noel Carver's company. Chapter 27. High Energy Solutions, a professional female voice said into the phone. How can I help you? Hi, I said. Wow, I wasn't sure someone would answer on a Saturday. Because so many of our partners are based in the Middle East, our work week is Sunday through Thursday, with a skeleton staff on Saturdays to deal with urgent issues, ma'am, said the woman. Wow, interesting. Glad I went ahead and called, although I'm not sure if you can help me. My rudimentary plan, if someone actually picked up, had been to try to play on the sympathy of whoever answered the phone by acting like a slightly confused, nervous bumbler. Looked like there wouldn't be much acting required. The disjointed sentences were flowing off my tongue with complete naturalness. The woman on the other end made a sympathetic and professional noise that also encouraged me to state my business and stop wasting her time. I was wondering, I said. I was wondering if Erin was there? Erin? Could you be more specific about which Erin you're referring to, ma'am? Yes, I said. Erin Carver, Noel Carver's cousin. Can I ask who's calling, ma'am? Sure. It's Rowena Halley. I'm an old friend of Erin's, just here in California for a short time. We were talking about getting together this weekend before I leave to head back east. I laughed. She gave me her number, but I must have written it down wrong, because Verizon keeps giving me the "this number is not in service" recording. But then I remembered her connection with Noel, and I thought I'd try giving here a call. I see, Ms. Halley. Is it Ms. Halley? Actually, I said, it's Dr. Halley. My apologies, Dr. Halley. The woman's voice sounded distinctly warmer. If you leave me your information, I'll see if I can pass it on to Ms. Carver. Wow, thanks, I said. I really appreciate it. Of course, Dr. Halley. Any time. Great. Thanks again for your help. Have a great day. You too, Dr. Halley. The call ended, leaving me to stare for a moment at my phone, wondering if I'd done the right thing. Chapter 28. I paced around the apartment for a few minutes, waiting to see if Erin would call me right back. She didn't. After pacing for long enough to listen to No Light in its entirety, I shut off the music app and got out the vacuum cleaner. Neither Alex nor I was particularly keen on vacuuming, and it hadn't been done in far too long. We were both neat and orderly by nature, and Alex had all that marvelous military training to install habits of cleanliness and order, but we were also busy and stressed out and unhappy. Plus, the elderly vacuum cleaner that had come with the apartment was loud enough, it was probably an OSHA violation to run it without ear protection. And it occasionally made strange whining noises and emitted an unpleasant dusty smell. I wasn't convinced running it did any good. In fact, I half suspected it actually deposited more dirt in the stained gray shag carpet than it removed. But I needed to occupy myself with something, so vacuuming it was. The apartment was small, but I vacuumed every square inch of it twice. I only checked my phone 3 times. Nothing. Not so much as a text from anyone. Okay, I could find something else to keep me busy. The bathroom needed to be cleaned. That would take at least 15 minutes. I'd had friends and roommates, especially, although not exclusively, of the male persuasion, who kept their bathrooms in health hazard status as a matter of course. Not Alex. When I'd shown up in May and asked if he'd scrubbed the entire thing down with a toothbrush in honor of my arrival, he'd told me, perfectly seriously, that he had, but he only did that 2 or 3 times a year. The rest of the time he made do with a sponge. I'd offered to help out with bathroom cleaning duty while I was there, but he'd still ended up doing it 90% of the time, and whenever I'd done it, I'd felt sloppy and inadequate. But his weekend was being taken up this time with Erin hunting duty, while I was sitting around doing nothing other than looking for ways to burn off nervous energy. I could do a decent enough job of it. I could even dig out the dedicated toothbrush and scrub the grout between all the tiles if I got really desperate. I felt like I'd gotten all I was going to get out of my Florence into the machine mix, so I switched over to the next selection. That might have been a mistake, since it turned out to be a Miranda Lambert Essentials collection. I listened to Miranda go over her failings in a failed relationship in More Like Her while I scrubbed the toilet. By the end of it, I was ready to lay my head down on the toilet seat and cry. "You are not like that girl. You..." Before I could finish telling myself what I was or was not, More Like Her ended and Gunpowder and Lead came on. Yeah, that's more like it. Now for the shower. I sprayed cleaner on the shower and started scrubbing it, while Miranda detailed her plans for dealing with her abusive husband. Maybe Erin should listen to this. Maybe it would give her some ideas for dealing with Frank. No, wait. I don't want to encourage her to shoot people. I'm against shooting people, even when they deserve it. Besides, it sounds like Frank is hardly the only person in Erin's life who deserves shooting. In fact, compared with some of the other men in her life, he might actually be a real prince. He might be... I dropped the sponge, ripped off my rubber gloves, and stopped the music just as the song ended with the sound of a shotgun blast. I checked my text messages and voicemail, just in case something had come in during the last 5 minutes. Nope. I tried calling first Alex, then Frank, again. Still no answer. I sent them each a quick text. Then, after wavering at the thought of looking like an idiot, I called up High Energy Solutions again. Chapter 29. The same coolly professional female voice answered the phone, asking how she could help me. "Hi, it's Dr. Halley again," I said. "Good afternoon, Dr. Halley. I passed on your message to Ms. Carver, but..." "This may seem like a weird question, but it's important," I said, interrupting her before she could finish explaining why it wasn't her fault that Erin hadn't called me back yet. "Yes?" Her voice got a lot chillier. "Is Noel there?" "Mr. Carver? Is he expecting a call from you?" "No, but it's important. Really important. I'm a bit worried. No, I'm more than a bit worried he might be in danger." "Danger?" Alarm crept in through the chilliness. "Yes, I have reason to believe it's possible that either he or Erin are in danger, or both. Are either of them there?" "I'm afraid neither of them are on the premises, Dr. Halley. If you think they really are in immediate danger, you should notify law enforcement." "Yes," I said. "Where?" "I'm sorry, Dr. Halley?" "What law enforcement should I notify? Where are they? What jurisdiction should I call?" There was a long pause at the other end of the line. "Am I to take it," the receptionist said finally, That you believe that Ms. Carver poses a threat to Mr. Carver. Yes, and I'm guessing maybe you do too. There was another long pause at the other end of the line. Ms. Carver has always been erratic, the receptionist finally said. Uh-huh, I said. I don't mean to speak badly of a friend of yours. She's more my boyfriend's ex-girlfriend than my friend, I said. Feel free to speak as badly as you want. A trace of humor crept into her voice. Well, in that case, Ms. Carver called here on Thursday, just before closing, demanding to speak to Mr. Carver. She sounded upset. As I said, she's always been, erratic, but this time was worse. This time she sounded positively... Her voice dropped. Unhinged. I was afraid, to be honest. And then what happened? Did he speak to her? He did. And, when he got off the phone with her, he asked me to make reservations for Friday and Saturday for the both of them at a B&B up the coast. Where? Which one? She hesitated. Look, I know you don't know me, and you don't have any reason to give me that kind of information, I said. But Erin's friends have been searching for her for the past 2 days, and we're really concerned for her, and maybe for anyone else involved with her as well. If you could try to get in touch with Mr. Carver, or call Frank McAvoy, he's an FBI agent. He's trying to find Erin. You can check him out. Why don't I get in touch with Mr. Carver, she said, and then I'll let you know what he says. At least he can tell you that they're both all right. Thanks, I said. I really appreciate it. I'll call you back when I know something, she said, and hung up. Chapter 30. I called Alex. Voicemail. I called Frank. Also voicemail. I called Alex again, and then again when he still didn't answer. On the 3rd try, he picked up. Rowena, is something the matter? I think I know where Erin is, sort of. Whoa, really? Where? In a B&B on the coast with her cousin, Noel Carver. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. You think she's with Noel? Alex finally said. No, that's not possible. And how'd you find out about him anyway? I gave a brief précis of my search for Noel and my conversations with the receptionist at High Energy Solutions. No, said Alex. No way. Why not? I asked. Because Erin fucking hates Noel, that's why. Because I had to stop her from blowing his fucking brains out more than once, that's why. Sudden voices rose in the background. Frank and Heather, I thought, asking what was going on. No doubt Heather was mentally noting all this down. Maybe that's why she arranged to get together with him, I said. To do it while you weren't around. No, surely the fuck not. Not after all this fucking time. Frank's voice rose in the background again, carrying an unmistakable air of command. Frank wants to talk to you, Alex said. I heard the phone get handed over, and then Frank came on the line. Rowena, you found Erin. I repeated my précis of recent events. Nice work. No, really, that's incredible. But you don't know where they are exactly. Not yet. Oh, wait, the receptionist is trying to call me back. Answer her, and tell her I'll be calling her ASAP too. Okay, I said, and switched over to the receptionist's call. Dr. Halley, are you there? Yep, I said. I tried to call Noel, Mr. Carver, but he wasn't answering his cell phone, so I called the B&B. They said Noel and Erin checked in yesterday, and then they had a noisy altercation, apparently. Well, 2 noisy altercations, one last night and one today. And the police came around asking for them first thing this morning. They left their room and drove off, but without checking out. The staff looked, and their things are still in their room. They were sharing a room? I asked. Well, yes, didn't you know? It's a bit sensitive, but they've had a relationship on and off for years. But they're first cousins, I blurted out. Yes, but you know Noel was adopted, don't you? There's no actual blood relationship. True, I said. Any idea where they might have gone? Maybe. I'm worried about Noel. The woman at the B&B said they appeared very strained when they left, and she almost thought... The receptionist's voice dropped to a whisper. She almost thought... It looked almost like Erin was carrying a gun or something. Maybe you should call the police, I said. Yes, I'm just worried they won't take it seriously. After all, they've already been out to talk to them once today. You should definitely talk to Frank McAvoy when he calls, which I'm sure he'll do in a few minutes, I said. He'll take it seriously for sure. Yes, I will. Where are you right now, Dr. Halley? Monterey, I told her. Oh, good. They're in Carmel now. It's only a few minutes away. Could you go check on them? At least go over to the B&B and see what's up. I said. Okay. Although I'm sure Frank will want to go. Yes, how soon will he be able to get there? He's in Salinas, so about half an hour if he doesn't hit a lot of traffic. Yes, and you can get over there in half the time. True, I said. Sure, I'll go over, but Frank's the person to handle this. Of course. Thank you so much, Dr. Halley. Do you have something to write on? I'll give you the name and address of the B&B. 3 minutes later, I was out the door, with the address of Erin's B&B on my phone map app. Expected arrival time was 10 minutes. Chapter 31. Erin and Noel were staying at a B&B on the corner of 4th Avenue and Dolores Street in Carmel. It was a pleasant neighborhood full of small inns and big trees. I parked on the street half a block away and hot-footed it over. I did a quick check of the parking lot tucked away behind the building before going inside. Erin's car wasn't there. I was not much of a car person, but I was pretty sure I could recognize hers because I'd listened to her explain to me in detail how it was a fifth-generation Camaro and what that meant. It was the only time I could remember her seeming happy. Just goes to show that everyone has hidden depths. Erin's, it seemed, included a passion for muscle cars. But at the moment, there was no sign of her cherry red Camaro in the lot. I called the receptionist at High Energy Solutions. Dr. Halley, have you found them? Not yet, I said. What kind of car does Noel drive? Did he take his own car to Carmel? He flew, she told me. It's a 7-hour drive from San Diego to Carmel, if you're lucky. He caught a flight Friday morning to the Carmel Monterey airport. The return flight is booked for tomorrow afternoon. He didn't ask me to book a car to pick him up. He said Erin was going to do it. Okay, I said. Well, her car's not here, so they're not back yet from wherever they went. I'm going to go inside and ask. The entrance to the B&B was through a tiled courtyard full of lush plants and little tables set amongst the planters in a way that maximized both capacity and privacy. It was very nice. I wondered how much this little weekend junket was costing Noel. Probably at least half a month of Alex's rent. I stepped into the cool interior of the building. It managed to be both shady and light and airy. Whoever had done the original design and the current interior decorating was talented. I revised my estimate of the cost of this weekend upwards. Can I help you? A woman about my age and height stepped out of a small side room into the foyer. She was wearing a bronze silk jumpsuit that brought out the warm tones in her dark brown skin, neat braids with little silver beads on the tips, and expertly applied lipstick and blusher in slightly metallic earth tones that complemented her jumpsuit. I idly wondered how much she made working reception here, such that she could afford to dress like that. I hope so, I said. I'm here looking for Erin and Noel Carver. An expression of alarm and distaste rippled across her face. Then she covered it up with a professional smile and said, Do you know Mr. and Mrs. Carver? Are they expecting you? I'm friends with Erin, I said. I'm looking for her. We're all very concerned about her. She just disappeared yesterday and hasn't been answering her phone. But it sounds like she's here." "Well," the woman hesitated. "We value our guests' privacy, of course," she said. "Of course," I agreed. "And many people like to keep it a secret when they elope and run off on a surprise honeymoon." "Elope? Erin and Noel got married." The woman smiled at that. No one was expecting that, were they? "You could say that," I said. "You're sure they got married?" She hesitated again. "Well, I wasn't at the ceremony, obviously, but they dropped some hints suggesting they just run away to get married, and this was their honeymoon. I probably shouldn't say any more. As I said, we value our guests' privacy." "Sure," I said. "Do you know where they are now?" She hesitated some more. "I don't want to bother them," I said. "I just want to check and make sure Erin's all right. It really took us by surprise when she disappeared without a word like that. Of course, who can blame her if she was sneaking off to her honeymoon, but I'd just like to check in on her. Then I'll get out of everyone's hair." "They're not in their room," said the woman. "I'm not sure where they are." A phone rang in the office. Someone answered, their voice muffled through the wall. After a moment, the conversation went silent. "Jeanette! Jeanette! Are you there, sugar?" A woman of at least 75 stepped out of the side office. Unlike Jeanette, she was petite, almost shriveled, with skin of an indeterminate tan that flirted with multiple racial categories. But she had the same air of elegance and the same large eyes with prominent underlids that Jeanette did. "Someone's on the phone, wanted to know about special rates for wedding parties," she said. Her voice held a strong trace of Atlanta. "I told them you handle all the special rates. Could you please step in and talk to them?" "Of course, Grandma. This is my grandmother, Geraldine," Jeanette told me. "She came out here from Atlanta 40 years ago and bought the place, turned it into what it is today." "It's lovely," I told Geraldine, and I thought I recognized an Atlanta accent. That's where I'm from, too, although I'm told I don't talk like it. She smiled faintly. "Thank you. And no, you don't, hon. Are you checking in?" "Actually, I'm here looking for a guest, Erin Carver. She checked in with Noel Carver." "Oh, yes, the Carvers." The same look of alarm and distaste rippled across Geraldine's face that Jeanette had been unable to suppress. "It's actually pretty urgent," I said. "I really need to talk to Erin right away. Do you know where she might be?" Geraldine hesitated. "We value our guests' privacy," she said. I nodded, of course. "But that Mrs. Carver—" I nodded some more, trying to make it look encouraging. "She's trouble. Anyone could see it." Geraldine's mouth pursed, and something shrewd peered out from her large brown eyes. "Yes," I agreed. "I'm afraid so. And I'm afraid she might be in trouble right now." "Some women drag trouble with them wherever they go, even on their honeymoons," said Geraldine. "They sure do," I agreed. "And right now, I'm afraid that's what Erin's doing. For starters, because her current boyfriend and her ex-boyfriend are both on their way down here to find her, and neither of them know about her getting married." Geraldine pursed her mouth up even more, but this time there was a strong hint of a wry grin in it. "You don't say. Some women. Are you trying to get to her ahead of them and warn her?" "Yes," I said. That thought had only just occurred to me, but now that I was thinking it, I was worrying about how Frank would react to finding out that Erin had run off to spend the weekend with another man, and was apparently passing herself off as his wife. There could be a perfectly innocent explanation for it. Scratch that. There couldn't possibly be a perfectly innocent explanation for why she would do something like that. But there could be one that didn't involve her cheating on Frank with her first cousin. I understood the thing about there being no blood relationship between them, but still. Geraldine sucked on her upper lip for a moment, then said, "They went out for breakfast this morning. after the police came by to talk to them, then had a big screaming fight when they got back to their room around midday. I didn't hear what it was about, but I sure heard that it was happening. I think everyone on the whole block heard that it was happening. Some couples, they get married. They think that's going to stop the fighting, but all it does is make it worse. I nodded. Then she went storming out of the building and over to her fancy red car. I thought she was going to drive off on her own, but he came running out after her, and she let him in and they drove off together. Any idea where they might have gone? I asked. She sucked on her upper lip again for a second, then said, They were talking about spending the day at Carmel River State Beach. They might have gone there. It's not far. Less than 10 minutes away by car. Great, I said. Thank you so much. I'll go check and see if I can find them. And, if anyone else comes looking for them, I guess you should tell them, too. Even if it's her boyfriend? Asked Geraldine. My first instinct was to say yes. Then I thought about Frank shooting Erin in the breast and started to doubt. What if she really had been cheating on him with Noel and had finally decided to dump him for good? What if that's what the original shooting incident had been about? Maybe Frank had guessed something of what was going on and things had gotten out of hand. On the other hand, Frank was going to find out one way or another. Better not to make him angry by trying and failing to conceal Erin's whereabouts. I just needed to try to control the situation, if I could. I guess you should go ahead and tell them, I said. And if they come to the beach, it's a public place, right? Surely no one will create too much of a scene. Geraldine gave me a skeptical eyebrow raise. The beach is probably pretty busy this time of day, but these folks don't seem to care too much about making a scene in public, hon. Well, good point. But we should probably still tell them, I guess. You send them my way, hun, said Geraldine. I'll hold 'em for a while for you. She gave me another wry smile. I know how to keep impatient men waiting if I need to. Great, I said. Thanks. Thanks so much for your help. And if Erin shows back up here, tell her Rowena is looking for her, will you? Sure thing, hun, said Geraldine. Good luck now. Chapter 32. My phone's map told me that Carmel River State Beach was indeed less than 10 minutes away. I got in my car and headed over. The beach was a mile-long crescent just south of the town. I parked at the public lot, right by the mouth of the Carmel River, and headed towards the beach. I passed a cherry-red late-model Camaro that was parked haphazardly in the corner, taking up 2 spaces. I broke into a run. There were plenty of other people on the beach. Joggers, dog walkers, and afternoon strollers moved past me in both directions, at various rates of speed. A group of teenagers was playing frisbee. A couple of sea kayakers were in the water. No one looked like Erin. I looked up and down the beach, searching for inspiration. Nothing brilliant hit me like a bolt from the blue. I pulled out my map app on my phone and looked at the map of the beach. It stretched a little ways north from where I was standing to Carmel Point, with trails snaking along the coast beyond. North or south? North or south? It was a beautiful sunny day on the beach. It should have been an idyllic afternoon for me and Alex, and Erin and whoever it was she was actually with, to sit out on the sand, maybe toss a frisbee back and forth, maybe stroll down to the next point. But the dark blue water seemed to hold an air of menace. Or maybe it was the signs warning people to stay out of the water because swimming was dangerous here. I turned left and started heading south. North led back to town. South led to Point Lobos State Nature Reserve. If I were Erin, I would want to be away from other people. I started jogging through the sand. My bad knee appreciated the soft cushioning it provided, but not the extra strain it was putting on my quads and calves. Geez, I really was out of shape. My phone pinged in my pocket as I came in sight of the end of the beach. I stopped, trying to tell myself I wasn't glad of an excuse to take a break, and pulled it out. It was a text from Alex. We're in Carmel at the B&B. The landlady is talking Frank's ear off, smiley face. Where are you? To tell or not to tell? To tell or not to tell? I decided I was more afraid of Erin than of Frank. Carmel River State Beach, I texted. Looks like her car's here, but I don't see any sign of her. I'm moving south down the beach, looking for her, but I haven't seen her or Noel yet. Have you checked the north end of the beach yet? Not yet. I'll go take a look, let you know what I find. You keep heading south. Got it. Let me know if you spot her. I put my phone back in my pocket and started jogging again. Slowly. Despite the urgency of the situation, I wasn't in a hurry to find Erin. I didn't like being on my own for this. I was half convinced that Erin was crazy, and I knew she had a gun. I didn't think she'd shoot at me if she was in her right mind, but maybe she wasn't in her right mind. Everything I'd heard from everyone who'd seen her in the past few days, Zeke and Tori, the bartender at the place she'd been at on Thursday, Heather, Jeanette and Geraldine, made it sound like she was on the verge of cracking up. Maybe past the verge. And she'd never expressed any animosity towards me, but I was the woman with the man she wanted. Or one of the men she wanted, at any rate. She had to hate me deep down. Hate me enough to shoot me on sight. I didn't want to think so, but this was the kind of situation where people did crazy things. And if she got into another big fight with Noel, I could literally be caught in the crossfire. On the other hand, I didn't really want to bring in Alex, and especially Frank. I trusted Alex to keep a cool head, but the sight of him might provoke Erin to do something bad. And Frank, I wasn't sure how Frank would react. If he saw Erin with another man, would he shrug it off as part of her general fucked upness, tell himself there was plenty more where that came from, and walk off? Or would he go ballistic and trigger a violent, potentially fatal confrontation? I could see him going either way. I'd never been able to get a handle on his feelings for Erin. Was she just a good-looking piece of ass who fed his superiority complex with her emotional fragility and the way she stuck with him despite the way he treated her and her obvious love for another man? Or was he really, truly in love with her, and that was why he put up with all the baggage and problems she brought along? I wanted to guess the former. I wanted to think that someone like Frank wasn't capable of being truly, deeply in love with another person. But maybe I was misjudging him. Or maybe his deep sense of possessiveness and entitlement would make him flip out and start shooting everyone in sight at the thought of losing something he thought belonged to him by rights. The beach came to an abrupt end at a rocky point. I cast about, looking for Erin. Nothing. But I did see a college-age couple leave the beach a little farther back by a service hut and pick up a trail on the headlands above the beach. I've made it to the end of the beach, I texted Alex. No sign of Erin or Noel, but there are trails leading farther on. Do you think they could have taken them? We just got to Carmel Point, he texted back. Don't see anything yet, but we need to look around a bit. There are trails running along the coast to Point Lobos. They could have followed them. It's worth checking out. Okay, I wrote. I'll keep going for a bit then. I backtracked, climbed up above the beach, and started down the trail above it. Geez, my knee was really unhappy. I dropped from a slow jog down to a walk. I went past a small cove, the water dark blue over black, unwelcoming rocks. The coast here was beautiful, but wild and threatening, with sharp drop-offs and, according to the warning signs, dangerous currents. A child of the Atlantic, I'd always thought of the Pacific as frightening, full of rip currents and sharks and other dangers. I'd occasionally waded in the water here, but never had the slightest desire to go swimming. I had no doubt this was a spectacular area to go diving in. I just planned to take in all its glories secondhand via TV documentaries. The trail crossed the bottom of a small but very rugged point. I pulled out my phone. What time was it? I'd been walking for the better part of an hour. The sun was already low in the sky. We needed to wrap this up soon or we'd be out in the dark. What was going on with Alex and Frank? No text from either of them. My knee was killing me. When could I legitimately stop? This was turning into a bust. We should stop, reconvene, and figure out a new strategy of investigation. The trail finished crossing the bottom of the rugged point and came to a much larger cove. It looked like there was a parking lot and visitors center at the far end of the cove, less than half a mile away. I would make my way there, and then I would call Alex and Frank and tell them to come pick me up. I started walking slowly along the trail again, concentrating on the ground in front of my feet. I'd pretty much given up on finding Erin, and I was getting tired of spectacular coastal California scenery. I just wanted to find some place I could sit down and rest my knee and send for Alex to come get me. There was a loud shout off to my right, from the direction of the beach. For half a second I thought it was people playing, but the shout held a note of alarm that no play acting ever would. I looked over. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed Alex. "You need to get here right away," I said as soon as he picked up. "Whaler's Cove. I've just found Erin."